Max Wright here, and I'm super pumped up today. I've been looking forward to this for over a month. I have an interview with a person who has been involved in Bitcoin. To my knowledge, he bought his first Bitcoin in 2011. In 2013, his business, Satoshi Dice, was responsible for 50% of every single transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. After the Mt. Gox fiasco, he created a non-custodial exchange, improving safety and, for a short time, privacy in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that privacy has kind of got stripped away, but then it's come back just recently. And we're going to talk a lot about that right now. So everybody, please smash up that like button and subscribe button for Erik Vorhees. Erik, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Did I get all those facts right, by the way? I should have checked that before we went live.
You got it.
Oh, there you go. Now I've just outed myself as a stalker, so that's a problem, but good stuff. And another little kick for the viewers. This is actually, when I first got into Bitcoin in 2013, there were 4 people that were the top of my list that I really wanted to interview. And Erik actually completes the 4. So it's taken, what do we do, 8 years to get here. But with this interview, it's completed my 4 Dream Team interview list, which is awesome.
Congrats.
So thank you. Okay, getting into it. Now, this is actually part 4 of a 4-part series about something that I think just completely changes the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem. For me, it's the most exciting thing that I've heard since I've heard about Bitcoin. And I think we're talking about something that's, it's a coin that I think is going to 100x, so you're definitely going to want to know about that. But also, I think it's going to change the industry so much. So with that change, it's going to bring a lot of opportunities. So hopefully we can leverage Erik's experience and big brain to come up with, how do we get in front of some big trends that are coming up? So if you haven't seen the previous, the rest of the series, look for the very first link in the description. It's a series about a project called Thorchain. And it's kind of assumed knowledge for this interview. So you might want to go back and watch that series on Thorchain, what it is, how it works, but a very brief synopsis. Actually, I might throw it over to you, Erik. Just in a couple of sentences, what is Thorchain to you?
So Thorchain is a decentralized exchange, most simply. Mm-hmm. And the way to think about it, for those that are new, is that it's similar in its model to Uniswap. But unlike Uniswap, it actually works across chains. So Uniswap only works in Ethereum with Ethereum and ERC20 tokens. Thorchain works across all major blockchains. So this means trading native Bitcoin for native Ethereum, and any other kind of chain can be integrated to it. So that is a step function improvement and a huge advancement in decentralized exchange technology.
Yeah, I agree. I think just industry shattering change, because effectively what it does, it's step 1 of bringing DeFi to Bitcoin. Up until now, if you want to do smart contracts, if you want to do locking up your coins and earning an interest on that, you can either do it with a centralized entity like, say, a BLOCKFI, or you don't do it with Bitcoin at all. But now all of a sudden you're going to be able to do that, earn a yield in a non-custodial way, or where you're the custodian. And this, to me, there's just so many things that happen from that. And it kind of, to my mind, it's kind of interesting. It just, whereas Bitcoin had that little bit of a deficiency, it kind of catches Bitcoin up in that way. And although I think Thorchain helps the whole industry, like all the chains, I think it really is a bit more advantageous to the ones like Bitcoin, which didn't have access to that DeFi natively before.
Yeah, the DeFi possibilities from Thorchain are important. But even before you get into the DeFi stuff, just the ability for some of these markets that have been captured by centralized exchanges, now those can be done in a decentralized way. So the world's biggest crypto market is Bitcoin to Tether. And that today, 99.999% of that is centralized exchanges. So you have this decentralized form of money, and that is important and powerful for all the reasons of decentralization that people understand. And yet all the trading of it in its biggest trading pair is done at centralized exchanges. That is a deficiency at minimum. So before Thorchain, you couldn't trade Bitcoin in any kind of scalable, efficient way with another asset without a centralized party. now you can. So that's massive. And it's not just that pair, it's Bitcoin to Ethereum, it's Monero to Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin Cash to Bitcoin. It's all of these major chains that have not been available in the Ethereum-based DEXs now can be traded together. And that's going to be a really powerful and consequential thing for the industry.
Yes, yes. We're talking about permissionless access to exchanges. We're talking about no KYC, no AML, and really, really fulfilling, I think, the vision of Satoshi. And also, Eric, you made just a champion of Liberty throughout the years that I've been following you. Can maybe, I think the story of Shapeshift and its response to Mt. Gox and then the challenges you've had with KYC, AML, if you wouldn't mind just a quick trip down history lane, I think that paints the perfect picture of the evolution about why Thorchain is so important.
Yeah. Shapeshift got started in early 2014, right in the wake of Mt. Gox exploding and losing $400 million of customer funds. And that event was, one of the most important in all of crypto history. It could have destroyed the industry. It didn't, but it at that point was the most profound, impactful event that had ever occurred. And when I had the idea for Shapeshift, the primary reason was to create a way to trade these digital assets without a custodian. So you would not have to leave your assets with Shapeshift. You just send a coin into us and we send you a coin right back to you. So you send in Bitcoin, we send you Litecoin. You send in Litecoin, we send you Ether. And by doing that, we would make the whole industry safer because we weren't holding your funds. Now, when we started that model, we did not have any user accounts or KYC at all. And our understanding of the legal landscape at that point was that because we were not handling fiat currency and because we were not a custodian, that we would not have to act like a bank in terms of adding KYC and all that. That was important to me because I think people have a default right to privacy. And so I don't want to take people's personal information. I don't think any companies should be forced to take people's personal information if they don't want to do so. And so we were comfortable in that model. Back then, also, there were a lot of people telling me like, hey, Eric, how is Shapeshift going to survive when there is decentralized ways of exchanging? And this is back in like 2014 and 2015 when decentralized exchange was very theoretical, and it largely had to do with a technology called atomic swaps. So maybe some of your audience have heard of atomic swaps.
We've heard about that in part 3, so I have a good grasp of that and the change to peer-to-pool.
Yeah, so atomic swaps have been around in theory for years and in practice at least since 2016, but they never caught on. And the reason they don't catch on is because their liquidity never becomes sufficient for a number of reasons you guys probably talked about. So Shapeshift was sort of this interesting model where we were not a decentralized exchange, but we were non-custodial. We weren't holding people's money, but we were a central entity. And by 2017, discovered that we were going to basically have to follow all the laws that a bank had to follow. And the difference there was that we were still an intermediary. So when an asset was sent to us, we would send another asset back to the person. That's what caused us to get caught up into all that regulation. So from 2018 through the beginning of this year, Shapeshift had to impose KYC on its customers. We had to take their personal private information, even though the customer didn't want to do that and we didn't want to do that, and it just made the experience worse and less safe for everyone. So 2020 comes along and we see the rise of some of these crazy DEXs like Uniswap, which had this new model of peer-to-pool, where instead of two parties having to find each other with the right amounts at the right time, you had a pool of assets and people would trade against the pool. So this allowed the liquidity to get much bigger, much faster. And these decentralized exchanges got massive. They were holding billions of dollars in crypto suddenly. All throughout 2020, they were growing rapidly. And the big caveat of all these was that they were Ethereum only. So there was a huge limit on how excited I could be about that, because yeah, that was cool. But if it's only Ethereum, it's missing the most important asset of all, Bitcoin, and any other interesting chain can't be supported either. So we basically learned about Thorchain in August of last year. and realized like, here's this brilliant model of Uniswap, but done across chain. And we looked into it and the technology was sound and it seemed actually plausible. So since August, we started changing Shapeshift's entire paradigm to no longer be a trading platform ourselves, and instead just integrate decentralized protocols. So in January, we had integrated all the major Ethereum-based exchanges. And when Thorchain finally launched, a month ago, we integrated Thorchain. So now on Shapeshift, any trade that happens is peer-to-pool from the user to a liquidity pool. We are not involved at all, which means we do not have to KYC users any longer. And we think this is the model for the future. Decentralized protocols are appropriately used for decentralized currencies.
Gotcha. So, I mean, to fully understand that, guys, we're talking about, this is a vision that you effectively had in 2014, and to properly and thoroughly implement it, really, it's taken until 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly when I first saw Uniswap and played around with it, I was like, man, this is kind of like Shapeshift, and I wish we had built this, but it was only Ethereum, and then when I find Thorchain, I was like, aha, this is it. This is the golden opportunity here to actually do the type of trading that Shapeshift wanted to be 6 years ago when the technology didn't exist. So we embraced it and we've integrated that into the Shapeshift platform.
Now, a question I've been wondering since watching this from afar is, I presume Shapeshift made its money in that arbitrage when money's coming in and out. I feel like the way I understand Thorchain, you're just a front end to Thorchain. What's Shapeshift's profit center now? Am I thinking of it correctly? Did it change, or what happened?
Yeah, so we are not an exchange anymore. So we don't try to make money from exchanging, and users of our platform can still do trades in exchange, but they're getting the pure pass-through rates as if they were going directly to Uniswap or directly to Thorchain.
Okay.
We, however, give people Fox tokens on the trades. So it's actually a much better deal to go through Shapeshift than even direct, because you're getting the same base rate, plus you're getting Fox tokens as a bonus. So we just don't try to make money on trading anymore.
Gotcha. Can you help me understand a little bit about Fox tokens? What are they?
Yeah, so the Fox token, for a while in 2019 and on, when we were still an exchange, basically the way that the tokens worked was if you held enough of those tokens, we would remove your fee. So if you had X amount of Fox tokens on your trade, you would not pay any trading fee to us. So you basically got access to free trading by holding Fox tokens. Now that we have integrated decentralized exchanges, that model doesn't make sense anymore because all the trades are free. We don't add a fee at all. So at this point, the Fox tokens allow people to earn money whenever someone is trading. We take some money from our own pool of assets and we send it off to people who hold Fox tokens through a program called Rainfall. So that's just kind of a promotional deal. And then just last week, we launched something called Fox Fuel, where when you do a trade, if you have enough Fox tokens, we will compensate you for the gas costs that you spent by doing that trade. So it's essentially like a loyalty program or rewards program for people that are using Shapeshift.
Cool. Thank you. Because I didn't understand what Fox token was doing there. Let's talk about this, if you don't mind. I'm not sure if this is your wheelhouse, but let's talk about competition to Thorchain. Are there other protocols trying to do the same thing? Are you aware of any, and are you aware of their status? And I've got my investor hat on here. It's like, Thorchain sounds absolutely amazing. I own some Rune, and I want to understand the landscape a little bit and see if there's something else out there in terms of competition.
Yeah, I guess first, the major competition everyone just has to acknowledge is the status quo centralized exchanges, right? That's where 99.999% of all the trading happens. So that is the biggest competition. Thorchain is this new thing. It has to earn its reputation. It has to gain users over time and capital and liquidity. But in terms of decentralized cross-chain trading, the only competitors are some of those atomic swap protocols. And those have been around for a few years. Some of them are okay products, but none of them have achieved liquidity, any degree of scale in that time. So they are technically competitors in that they, if you really wanted to do a Bitcoin to ETH trade decentralized, you could go to an atomic swap protocol and do that even before Thorchain, but there would be a ton of caveats and asterisks. The price you get would be bad. You might not be able to do the trade at all at that time. The size might be limited that you can do. And it's just not the same experience as going to Thorchain, and regardless of timing, regardless of size, just being able to send in your Bitcoin and get ETH out. It's a totally different experience. So to my knowledge, I have not seen any peer-to-pool based decentralized exchange competitors to Thorchain. We will see if any emerge, because I think Thorchain is going to be quite successful. So we'll see, what kind of other projects are waiting in the wings trying to do it.
And further to that point, still with my investor hat on for Thorchain, Thorchain is an open source project. Are there any kind, is there, like we saw what happened with SushiSwap and Uniswap, is there anything, is there any kind of moat that's kind of like, and I say an investor moat, that kind of like resists challenges from competitors? Or is this very much a situation where someone could come along, fork it, and if they were able to establish community somehow, they could be off and running?
I think the two major moats are Rune, the token itself, because you can't copy liquidity, right? Like you could copy all the Thorchain code and release something tomorrow that was the same with a different brand, but you don't have the Rune token, and you'd make your own new token, but that token has to gain market cap, it has to gain liquidity, it has to gain trust. That takes time. So that is a big moat, that liquidity. When SushiSwap copied Uniswap, Uniswap didn't have a token at that point. So that was a big difference. The other major moat is just the integrations. So Shapeshift has integrated Thorchain. Let's say someone tomorrow copied Thorchain and created a clone of it. We're not going to put any time into integrating that clone until and unless it got big enough to be worth our time. So that becomes a chicken and the egg problem, right? Where a lot of people who have spent the time to integrate Thorchain have no incentive or reason to integrate anything else unless those things achieve substantial size. But that's the whole challenge. So, no one should assume that any project in crypto is beyond competition. But Thorchain certainly has a great head start, and the Rune liquidity is really the most powerful network effect that the project has.
Cool. Excellent. Okay. I mentioned competition here a little bit ago, and I would like to run two names down that I've just come across, and I haven't gone into them in depth. I'm wondering if you've heard of them, and maybe it falls into the categories you've just spoken about, but Chainflip, have you heard of this project?
I have heard of the project, but I'm not sure what its status is. Okay,
no worries. And DefiChain?
I've not heard of DefiChain. Okay. I think Chainflip hasn't actually launched yet. And I don't know anything about DefiChain.
I think you're correct on both fronts. I think neither of them have launched yet in a meaningful way. But I think they're trying to do things a different way, not the exact same way. I don't think they're trying to do them with Atomic Swap, but I'm just early in on my research on that, so going to get to that at some point.
Yeah, for your audience, the two things to always ask about if you find a competing project is A, have they launched, right? Because words are easy, but actually launching is all of the work. Two is it actually a peer-to-pool model, or is it atomic swaps, which some of these projects are, or is it synthetic assets?
Yes.
So there's a number of decentralized exchanges that are built on a custom chain, and they'll say, trade Bitcoin to Ethereum, but the asterisk is that you're trading wrapped Bitcoin to wrapped Ethereum or something like that. So the real test is if you can trade native Bitcoin unwrapped with native Ethereum unwrapped today at scale without any intermediary or any limitation on size.
Yep.
Any other project that can do that would be a competitor, but I've not found any.
Yeah. All right. Let's really unleash the big brain here a little bit if we can. I think it's cataclysmic. Like what you've described and what Thorchain is I think the biggest shift to the industry that I've seen since the invention of Bitcoin. Where do you see opportunities in the next few years? What do you see will be the change in landscape? Even from simple things like Bitcoin dominance to not. What are the changes that you anticipate may or may not happen as a result of the introduction of this new technology?
I think that, first of all, the trading of non-Ethereum assets can finally move into a decentralized form. and that's huge. I think that brings liquidity into the ecosystem of decentralized trading that just could not happen. And this means that some portion of the global trade volume of these assets moves out of centralized exchanges and into decentralized exchange. So that's a big shift. Two is I think that it connects these chains in a really interesting way. So to date, all the chains have been their own island. You had the Bitcoin island, and you had the Bitcoin Cash island, and you had the Litecoin island and the Ethereum island. Bitcoin island is the biggest in terms of market cap. Ethereum island is the biggest in terms of apps and users, but they're all islands. I think this year we start to see actual integration of these things between each other. And on one layer that happens with decentralized exchange like Thorchain, and on the other layer that's from things like Cosmos, which are actually building up to integrate the chains themselves. So this is very cool, because then I think you'll be able to get applications that make use of the advantages of each chain, right? So there's a lot of things on Ethereum that are really awesome DeFi apps, but I don't want to hold a ton of money in those things. Like, I'd rather hold long-term capital in Bitcoin. It's just a more conservative asset. But these things have been disparate. If I can move, especially if a bot can move between Ethereum and Bitcoin easily with no intermediary exchange between it, then you get a flourishing and a coordination between these two assets where they each are helping each other out. So I think that'll be great for the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. I think where my mind went to when I first heard this, I think like it's a smart contract world, the Ethereum world had something that Bitcoin just didn't have. And it created a reason. And you can put a magnitude to that reason, whatever you wish. There's a strong reason to be outside of there, to be outside of the Bitcoin world. And with the introduction of this, for all the reasons that you just said, I think this somewhat secures Bitcoin's place as the top dog. And I just see it strengthening the Bitcoin dominance. Of course, there's a lot of other vectors to this argument, but this particular vector, I feel like the number one vector to take capital away from Bitcoin has been largely overcome. Do you think I'm thinking of that in the right way?
Yeah, and to just show how that's real, right now you can't earn yield on native Bitcoin unless you trust a custodian. So everyone's heard of BLOCKFI or Celsius. You can give them some of your Bitcoin and you can earn a yield. In the DeFi world, you can earn a yield on Ethereum or any of the Ethereum ERC20 assets without a custodian, without an intermediary, which is awesome. So if you care about immutable money and you'd like a yield, probably that's everyone, right? Should be everyone. The only option you had was to leave Bitcoin entirely and go to Ethereum or some asset in that ecosystem. With Thorchain, you can now earn a yield on native Bitcoin with no intermediary, just from contributing Bitcoin into the liquidity pool. You can already earn like 10 to 20% a year on native Bitcoin in that model in an immutable way, which is something that BLOCKFI can never do. Like just this last week when all the markets were dying and everything was crazy, BLOCKFI had suspended withdrawals for a couple of days because they had some error in their system and they were trying to be careful with their money. I get it, but you could not withdraw from BLOCKFI. There's never a point where you can't withdraw from a DeFi application. You simply execute the contract and it goes. That immutability is key to these systems. And so now you can earn yield on Bitcoin in an immutable way through Thorchain instead of having to leave for the Ethereum ecosystem. So to your point, like you now have more reason to hold more Bitcoin because some of those ancillary services that are value add are now able in Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think about, because right now the interest rate that one can earn by depositing your Bitcoin on Thorchain is in the order of 10%. I think that will come down as it matures, but just for round numbers, let's just call 10%. I think about, well, how does this affect the crypto winter and the 4-year cycle? We see these big dips of the crypto winter. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. So if I just, let's just call the crypto winter 2 years. Let's say like the price drops, like, previously it's dropped 80% or 60% or whatever it's dropped. If I can hold Bitcoin and earn 10% on it for those winter years, 10% 1 year, 10% the year after, I mean, that's just reduced the size of that crypto window. Let's say it went down by 60, but while I was there, I earned 20% more. So it just reduced the depth of the crypto winter. So now it only went down by 40 if it went down as far as that as last time. But because of that, maybe it won't go down as far at all because more people are enticed to hold.
Well, and when you get DeFi services, you have the ability to not sell things that you otherwise would need to sell, right? So let's say you have $1 million in Bitcoin, and in a normal crypto winter, or before that in the bubble, you want to buy like a $500,000 house, right? And you're like, okay, I've ridden this wave a long time. I want to diversify out and get some real world assets for a while. You would traditionally sell the Bitcoin, buy your house, right? Now that there are these loans from DeFi protocols, and now that you can earn interest, you could take, for example, half of your Bitcoin, or you could take your Bitcoin and pull out a loan of, $500,000 against that, backed by your Bitcoin. And then you've now not sold anything. You don't have a tax event, which is huge. You're not losing immediately like 20 to 50% of your assets through the tax hit. And you've bought the house. And because you long-term believe that Bitcoin will rise, even though you're going to go through months or a couple of years of a bear market, ultimately, as long as you're patient, the value of those Bitcoin will rise, and you will have prevented yourself not only from getting the tax hit, but preventing yourself from the opportunity cost of losing the Bitcoin that you otherwise would have suffered by selling, right? So the next time the bull market comes along, you have all the Bitcoin that you had before. And so that in itself will prevent a lot of people who would have otherwise sold because they felt that they needed to. And now they can simply borrow, worthless fiat against the pristine collateral of Bitcoin.
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons stacking up that the crypto winter is not as deep, will not be as deep as maybe it has in previous years because of all this stuff that's happening. Now I'm going to ask a question that neither of us are qualified to answer officially. So, but you mentioned the tax hit about depositing and borrowing against. To begin with, we have an international audience, so giving tax advice on any one jurisdiction would be insane. We can't do that, and I don't think Erik's an accountant. I certainly am not. But I don't mind speculating on how people are going to handle this in the background. When you deposit Bitcoin, let's say you just put a big stack of Bitcoin on and into the pools on Thorchain. You can deposit Bitcoin and you can pull out Bitcoin plus its interest. However, in the background, what is happening, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Erik, half of your Bitcoin is liquidated into Rune, exchanged for Rune. And if you deposit 10 Bitcoin into the pool, you actually hold 5 Bitcoin and 5 Bitcoins worth of Rune. And you have exposure to both of those two markets. And then when you go to withdraw, it's undoing that process and you're just withdrawing. So yes, you deposited Bitcoin to the protocol, you withdrew Bitcoin from the protocol. It feels like a bank account you never actually sold. But given that background process, do you think that they may be viewed as a taxable event?
It's a good question. There's zero precedent for anything so weird, right?
Exactly.
If you give in a traditional sense, if you give your property to some kind of other entity, and then they pay you back with interest later, it doesn't really matter what they did with the property you gave them.
Yeah.
Right. You're contributing an asset, you're getting that asset back plus interest. Any income that interest would be certainly taxable. And whenever you sell into fiat, any capital appreciation would be taxable. But just because the mechanism into which you put your asset is itself doing things beyond that, it's not clear, right? I think there's a strong argument that it's not a taxable event, but there is no No one knows, right?
They can make up whatever they want, right?
Throw that tax question to a tax accountant, and if they are honest, they will say, I have no idea. Yeah. Because it's just not happened before. A lot of this stuff in crypto is without analogy. I do want to clarify, though, that you said in these Thorchain liquidity pools, when you put in Bitcoin, it's automatically selling half that Bitcoin for Rune. That can be the case. So there's essentially two ways to contribute capital to the pool. One is what you said, which is called asymmetric liquidity providing. You're just taking one asset. Each pool is Rune plus the asset, right? So in asymmetric liquidity providing, you're providing one asset, in this case, Bitcoin, into the pool. From a user experience perspective, that's all you know is happening. What occurs as soon as your Rune enters the system, or your Bitcoin enters the system, is what you said. Half of it is sold for Rune, and you have $1 to $1 of both parts. However, you can also contribute both assets together. $10 of Rune, $10 of Bitcoin in at the same time. If you do that, then no selling occurred, but you have to have the Rune, right? So both can work. A more advanced version of Thorchain in the future will inevitably have service providers that are willing to provide the other side of the capital. So if you have a Bitcoin and you don't want to buy Rune and you don't want your Bitcoin sold for Rune, if you were paired with someone else who could put up 1 Bitcoin worth of Rune at the same time, now you've solved that problem. So that's a service that some entrepreneur will build, or a contract will be able to do it. But lots of those options are available.
Yeah, and that's, again, getting into the question I asked previously, like let's let those brains, like what opportunities exist. I think that issue is a huge opportunity for an entrepreneur to come along, and a relatively easy one to do. They can use a 2 of 3 multi-sig, and when the 2 parties want their money back, the 3rd party is not required. And so they pool the resources. They deposit it as a team, a Rune holder and a, let's call it Bitcoin or Litecoin or anything else. They deposit as a team, and then they get it back. And with multi-sig, the 3rd party should never be used, but they can be in an emergency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could also have an entrepreneur just create derivatives to protect you from the risk. So let's say you put in Bitcoin, knowing it will be sold half and half, and all you want to do is remove the exposure to the Rune volatility. You could buy a derivative that covers that, right? And so then it's some fixed cost and you're covered on that side. So all those kind of services will get built up around Thorchain as it grows.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so let me just rephrase that again for the viewers. What we're talking about is, you're putting your Bitcoin, it gets transferred to Ethereum, to Rune, and over here on some other exchange, you can take an opposite bet, or even on the same exchange, probably. You can take an opposite bet so that you can be shorting Rune over here because you just longed Rune here when you didn't want to. You just wanted to be exposed to Bitcoin, and you can negate that thing. And so that's a very interesting concept too. There's 2 different ways to solve that problem. Yeah.
So the way it plays out is that, let's say you could earn 10% on the Bitcoin you contribute. You'll have to pay some kind of premium for the protection of volatility on Rune. So maybe you're paying 1 or 2 or 3% for that protection. So your net is just 7%, but it's 7% where you know that you don't have exposure to the Rune volatility. Some people will prefer that, some people won't. All of those options will be available.
Yeah, but like you said, in an immutable way, like all done on this.
Exactly.
Very, very cool. Let's shift gears a little bit here too. I want to talk a little bit about the flippening and the potential thereof. Because I'm overexposed in Bitcoin compared to other assets myself, and so the thing plays in my mind, especially as we've just had a very short and sharp altcoin season. It's possibly just ended, possibly not. But we saw the altcoins explode while Ethereum while Bitcoin kind of struggled. And so, 2-part question for you. One, is a flippening possible / likely of any other coin over Bitcoin, do you think? 3-part question. 2, does Thorchain change that and change the dynamics of that possibility? And 3, a tougher one, I think maybe, is if a flippening does occur and Bitcoin is no longer top dog, and given that some of the newer coins like Ethereum, for example, have added extra features, does this largely take away Bitcoin's Bitcoin's place? Like, do you think Bitcoin could ever earn it back if there was a solid flippening? There's a whole world there on flippening. Just take it wherever you want.
Yeah. So could a flippening of Bitcoin occur? Of course, right? Like anyone who says it's impossible is just talking their own book and not being honest. Is it likely? I don't know. I think if any asset would do it, it would be Ethereum, right? So the only asset I would even consider as possibly likely would be Ethereum. But I still don't have enough confidence to say that that is likely. My bet is still on Bitcoin maintaining the lead in terms of market cap. That's a hard thing to overcome because the liquidity of Bitcoin is so much deeper than Ethereum. And among the people that hold it, a lot of them who have just become comfortable with Bitcoin still have a lot of learning to do before they would ever become familiar with Ethereum. So in other words, there is a time delay of this liquidity where it gets larger and larger and larger, and it takes months or years for someone who learned and is comfortable with Bitcoin to then step into Ethereum. So it's a hard network effect to overcome. So it could happen. I have no idea what the odds of it are happening. Bitcoin's greatest, beyond the liquidity and the established reputation and brand awareness of Bitcoin, the reason to own it and believe that it has a good chance of preventing Ethereum from flipping in it is because as money, the feature of being conservative is really important, right? So Ethereum definitely has a culture of change, innovation, and that's great. It's really working for Ethereum. Bitcoin has a culture of not changing much, if at all. And that's also working for Bitcoin. So in both cases, their strategies are working. Bitcoin is slow moving and conservative. Ethereum is fast moving and innovative. And for both use cases, that is actually the right strategy on both sides. So the question is like, can Ethereum with its fast moving iterative nature ever build the one feature that Bitcoin really has, and which is hard to compete with, which is that it moves slowly and is more trustable? That I don't know. It's unlikely for Ethereum to be able to do that anytime soon.
Yeah, and how much of a premium the marketplace puts on that, I guess, comes down to that question.
Yeah.
It's the premium of stability versus the premium of growth and innovation and wherever this goes.
Yeah, and I think we have a huge milestone of the switch to the proof of stake. So Ethereum is going through this multi-stage process where it ends up proof of stake. There's no guarantee it does that successfully. Some horrible disaster could befall it. And for that reason alone, I think it's very reasonable to stay overly weighted into Bitcoin because of that risk. If that is done successfully, and depending on if Ethereum at that point starts slowing down and letting itself ossify and become more conservative, then it becomes more plausible that that risk premium is gone somewhat. But that's 1 to 2 years from now. We'll see. I own both. I love both. And I think what's most important is simply that the ecosystem of digital assets is in this hyper competitive state, and that is good for everyone. And people that get too worried that the coin that they own will be outcompeted by another one are kind of missing the forest for the trees. The whole point of this stuff is to change the entire financial system of the planet. That's what people should care about, right? So focus on that. If Ethereum overcomes Bitcoin, sure, that sucks for anyone who was overweight Bitcoin, but that's not as important as actually changing the financial system of the planet. So like people should keep their eyes on the prize there.
Yeah, fair. Now, the place I actually heard about Thorchain was from you. I think it was an interview with Raoul Pal. It was the first time I heard Thorchain. I think it was. I think Rune was at $1 at the time, and it recently blew up, went to $20, came back down to 10 as with this last altcoin season pop of the bubble. But I wanted to ask you, is there any other projects outside of this world that has got you excited or you've got your eye on, which you think could be as important as this project?
So the other one that I really love right now is Haven.
What do they do?
You've heard of Haven?
I have not. What do they do?
So Haven has an interesting story. Haven is a privacy coin. At its simplest level, it's a clone of Monero. So that in and of itself is not interesting, but it's the Monero privacy and anonymity technology, the ring signatures and the crypto note protocol cloned. And then a framework for stable assets built on top of that to be done, also anonymous. So in Haven, you have the main token XHV, which is the Haven crypto asset. That's a volatile asset that'll rise and fall with supply and demand, and that is anonymous. You can use it to create these what are called X assets. So XUSD was the first one. XUSD is a stable coin pegged to USD, and it's created out of XHV. And when it's destroyed back into XHV. So what it means is you can, let's say you have $10,000 of Haven XHV, and for whatever reason you think the market's going to decline, you can convert, let's say, all $10,000 of that into XUSD. So on that day, you convert the XHV into 10,000 XUSD, and now you have 10,000 units of a stable coin at the dollar, right? Those are also private and anonymous. So you can transfer those around with people with the same anonymity of the XHV or of Monero. So that's cool. Now you have a stable coin with the privacy of Monero. That hasn't been done before. Let's say you're correct in your call, all the crypto markets plummet and Haven has fallen by 50% 2 weeks later. And now you're like, okay, bottom's in, I'm ready to move back into the speculative asset. You convert your $10,000 of XHV back, or sorry, of XUSD back into XHV. What it does is it converts those into XHV at the current exchange rate. So now again, you have $10,000 of XHV. Now, because the price fell, you have twice as much as when you started with. Same dollar amount, but twice as much. And all of this is anonymous. And there are not just XUSD, but Euro, Gold, even XBTC. So you can have a derivative Bitcoin token with the privacy features. And these are all derivative tokens with the anonymity of Monero. So that's a lot of words to throw out there, but that ecosystem I think is super cool, super powerful, and something I'm very excited in because I think digital assets should be more private. Yeah,
very cool. So help me just to understand that. Not only do we have the anonymity aspect of that private coin, but the coins, so the stable coins in that ecosystem are backed by the Haven token. Is that correct?
Yeah, but you have to be careful when you use the word backed. They're backed in the same way that I believe DAI is backed, which is that you create and destroy Maker to create DAI. Right. So there's no centralized entity. It's not like Tether that's holding XHV to back the XUSD. It's an algorithmic mechanism. And this is the kind of thing that, like, before Maker, I would have thought was impossible, or I'd be very skeptical that economically that could work. But the longer Maker and DAI have existed, the longer I have to acknowledge that this seems to be working. And I'm very curious if it can work long-term and at scale, but so far it has been. So when you create XUSD, you're destroying XHV, it's gone. And when you destroy XUSD, you're creating XHV. So the supply of XHV can shrink or grow as people move in or out of the assets that are based on it.
Understood.
It's also the same way that UST, the Terra stablecoin, works. So Terra is a volatile cryptocurrency. UST is the stablecoin based on Terra. It's that same mechanism.
Gotcha. Because I have this question all the time asked in my channel. It's like, okay, in crypto winter, let's say I think I'm at the top of the Bitcoin price. I want to get out into some kind of, do I put the money into dollars, but I'm worried about bank runs? Or like, and then I say, so should I go to Tether? And I was like, well, that won't solve the problem because Tether is backed by dollars and banks.
Exactly.
So there's the problem there. But this is a cryptographically sound way of creating the dollars that hold their value to real world.
Yeah,
And then you throw
there's no
privacy on top
slippage,
of that.
and there's no slippage, and it just, you're not going to an exchange to trade the XUSD into XHV, although you could do that. You're in the app on your computer. You're converting one into the other with no slippage at the dollar exchange rate of the time. So I think it's warranted to remain skeptical of this model because it's really profound, and I don't know that it will work long term, but it is working and it's live today. I've tried it, I've played around with it, and if it is sound, which can only be vetted with time, it's immensely powerful.
Yeah.
What's very cool now is to see Thorchain and Haven have become like BFFs, and the Haven team has done the integration of Haven for Thorchain. So one of the upcoming assets that will be added to Thorchain will actually be Haven. And that means you'll be able to go from Bitcoin into XUSD, private XUSD, directly through Thorchain. So the Haven ecosystem makes Thorchain cooler, the Haven ecosystem makes Bitcoin cooler, and vice versa. And this is what I mean when I say these things are like starting to come together in a really incredible way.
Yeah, yeah. Again, this is exactly the kind of thing I was hoping to get from this interview. Like one of the things, just seeing where that's going and the opportunity there, because it's world changing as the trustlessness of the ecosystem expands. Then more and more of the world gets sucked into this trustless environment, and we can operate globally, without having to trust people on other sides of the world. The code takes care of the trust. And what that means for efficiencies and growth and all that thing is just mind blowing.
Yeah, and think about this. So on Haven, you have the XBTC, which is the anonymous Bitcoin derivative. That will also be on Thorchain. So if you wanted to do a private Bitcoin transaction, let's say you trade Bitcoin, native normal Bitcoin, into XBTC, right? So it's a $40,000 Bitcoin. Now you have a $40,000 derivative private Bitcoin. Send that to the person you want to send to. They then convert that back through Thorchain again into normal BTC. And what I just described there could be done in less than an hour, but you've completely broken the chain that otherwise would have been tracked over the Bitcoin blockchain because you moved into this derivative anonymous asset. That is super, super cool.
That is very cool. Because I was thinking, so I had taken this a little ways, not as far as that. Again, thinking about just how cataclysmic to the ecosystem Thorchain is, not even knowing about this concept, I deduced that, okay, you can go from Bitcoin and you can change it to straight to Monero if Monero is available on Thorchain. You're in this anonymous world, you can mix it, send it to your own Monero address. You don't have to mix it, just send it to your own Monero address. It's never left your custody. And then you switch it back from Monero back to Bitcoin. And you have now just got Bitcoin that was not tracked on the Bitcoin blockchain. You've broken that thing.
Yep. So what I just described is that, but without the price volatility.
Yes.
And Monero will also be added to Thorchain. It's actually being added by the Haven team because they are some of the preeminent experts on Monero. They're integrating Haven and Monero kind of together because they're based on the same technology into Thorchain.
So let's let our mind run. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's let our mind run down that avenue if we can. With this world, there comes some negatives. The ability to wash money like this and the privacy. There is some negatives to it. There's also an enormous amount of positives to it. Well, maybe we need to go forward 10 to 20 years to fully comprehend where this leads. But where does it lead for society? What are the big changes, both good and bad, that occur with? I remember, like in 2013, like we all thought Bitcoin was anonymous. Pretty much not now. And where does this lead? What just let your mind go? Like what happens in 10, 20 years as we have this new technology?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think most people are good people. Like that's one of my assumptions, that bad people are the minority, not the majority. And that whenever there is a very profoundly powerful technology, it's important to distribute that technology among people as broadly as possible. So this is the same reason why I advocate that anyone should be allowed to own a gun. because most people are good, and that's an important equalizing technology. I don't want something as dangerous as guns only being in the hands of governments. I think that scares the hell out of me. In the same way, like computing technology, incredibly profound and powerful. How horrible would that be if only governments had this kind of technology? Like if only governments had the internet to communicate with each other instantly around the world, like that would be unjust. That would probably lead to horrible degrees of corruption and power. That would scare me. It's good that something as powerful as the internet is in the hands of everyone. It's good that something as powerful as mathematics is in the hands of everyone, or language is in the hands of everyone. It's good that air is in the lungs of everyone, right? Like anything that is important and critical and powerful should be as broadly distributed as possible. Not because that prevents the bad actors from ever doing bad actions, but because it prevents a concentrated group of bad actors from ever having an upper hand over the rest of the public. So crypto, I think, expresses that very well. Generally, privacy-based crypto is just a further application of that. And I think all people should have the presumption of innocence and should have a right to privacy if they're not even accused of a crime. So to the degree people can find privacy technologies, they deserve to have them. And anyone who's working on that I think is doing really important work.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap it up there. Erik, thank you so much. That was just an enthralling conversation. I really enjoyed it. Please go ahead. Let me know in the comments below, guys. What did you learn? What was your favorite takeaway from this conversation? What technologies are you excited about? Where did your mind go? When you think over the horizon, where do you see the opportunities for investors as this landscape changes and matures? What are you going to be looking out for? And remember, smash that like button and subscribe button. A big thank you to Erik. Erik, thanks again, and hopefully we'll get to see you again soon.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me on.